Okay, good evening, everybody. We're gonna do a little bit different this week. I know we've been doing a lot of different kind of things. We haven't really done the Parsha necessarily, but that's okay. This week we're going to actually study the laws that the Maimonides, that the Rambam speaks about at the end of his magnum opus, the Mishnah Torah. Last Shabbat was the end of the yearly cycle and 3-year cycle to study the entire Mishnah Torah in a year or 3 years, depending on the cycle. So they coincided this cycle with the 3-year cycle and the 1-year cycle ending on the same day, and as well as the learning of the Sefer HaMitzvos, which is also a tremendous study regimen. So we recommend that for everybody. So because of that, we are going to study the last portion of the Rambam and discuss the topic of Techiyas HaMesim, of revival of the dead, as well as the coming of Moshiach, which he discusses in the last final chapters of his work called the Mishnah Torah. So we're going to start with we'll start with the timing of what is the timing of the timing of the different things that have to happen when the coming of Mashiach. So the first thing is that before the gathering of all the exiles, there is going to be the coming of the building of the Beis Hamikdash. The building of Beis Hamikdash is the first thing, followed by gathering the exiles, followed by Techiyas HaMesim. Okay. According to some opinions, there will be actually even a 40-year difference between the gathering of the exiles and the resurrection of the dead. We'll get into that more later. Okay, so if we look at Maimonides, he says very clearly that at the end of chapter 11, number 1, he says, in the future, the Messianic king will arise and restore the Davidic dynasty to its initial sovereignty. He will build a temple and then gather the dispersed of Israel. Okay, so it's very clear. First, he will build the temple, and then he will gather the dispersed of Israel. This is also mentioned in the Zohar that that first comes the temple, then the gathering of the exiles, as it says in Psalms. It says, "Lord rebuilds Jerusalem. He gathers in the exiles of Israel. He heals the brokenhearted and banishes their worries." So we see here that rebuilding the Beis Hamikdash is the first thing, followed by gathering the exiles and healing the brokenhearted. So, and that is how Maimonides says that is the law. Just for the record, even though that most of Maimonides' laws have been discussed and recodified in many different codes, such as the Shulchan Aruch and later versions of that, as that the Shulchan Aruch only discusses practical laws of living in exile. Maimonides also discusses laws that pertain to all of Jewish law, including things that are not practiced today. So anything like this, Maimonides is pretty much the final say. Okay. Now, what's the next thing? What about the dead? How is this going to happen? So it says, so first we're going to have the dead rise in the land of Israel, followed by the dead rising after the land of Israel, and thirdly, the last people will be those who died in the desert after the exodus of Egypt. Some say actually it will be our forefathers, the Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They will be the last to arise, and this is based on the Zohar. Again, the Zohar says that Rabbi Yochanan said, the dead from Israel will be resurrected first, as it says, "Let your dead be resurrected, let your corpses rise," refers to the dead from outside of Israel, and "awake and shout for joy, you who dwell in the dust," refers to the generation of the desert. So this is based on the Zohar, again, that specifically it will be the people in Israel will be versus outside of Israel. That's in the first one. There's now a second opinion of this, that it will be in a different order. And this is mentioned in Akvas Rachel as follows. Rabbi Shimon Omer, Mesei, Eretz Yisrael, Chaim Techila. Rabbi Shimon says the dead of the land of Israel will rise first, followed by the dead from outside of Israel. and finally those who rest in Hebron. Okay, so again, so the second opinion, right? So we had the first opinion of the Zohar that it will be in the first, the last one will be the people at desert. The second opinion that it's going to be our forefathers, as we mentioned earlier. Why should they? Why will the forefathers be last? Because they should come and rise and be full of joy, seeing their children who have risen from their graves in the land filled with righteous and pious people. Simple, right? The same reason why Adam was created last, right? So he could come into a world that was ready for him. So too, our forefathers will come last to see all their ancestors ready for them. According to another Zohar, it actually says, first the righteous will rise, followed by everyone else, followed by, Torah scholars first, followed by those who focused on mitzvahs. So again, that's a third opinion that we're going to have. It's going to be first the righteous, specifically those who study Torah, followed by those who emphasis was on mitzvahs. A fourth opinion is the dead will be called and resurrected in alphabetical order, meaning the Aleph base. However, the humble people will rise before everyone else. And that is from the Mishnah, which is quoted in a few places. So, the Midrash. I apologize. The Midrash that is quoted in a few places. So we have four different opinions of what order will be the coming of the resurrection of the dead. What's next? Where will they come alive? So the first thing is we have the first source is the Talmud. Rabbi Elazar said, this is in Ketubot 111a, the dead from outside Israel will not be resurrected in the future, as it says, I will set glory in the land of the living. This teaches that with regard to a land which contains my desire, it still will come alive. However, with regard to a land which does not contain my desire, i.e. outside of Israel, it said will not come alive. So Rabbi Elazar explains that only the dead will only be revived in the land of Israel. So what's the obvious question? So we said earlier, right, that obviously the righteous people are the ones who's going to come first, according to one opinion, right? So if there's righteous people who are buried, and many righteous people have been buried outside the land of Israel, will they not become resurrected? So the Talmud continues. Rabbi Elah said they will be resurrected by means of rolling, i.e., they will roll until they reach the land of Israel, where they will be brought back to life. Rabbi Abba Saleh Rabbah strongly objects, and he says rolling is an ordeal that entails suffering for the righteous. So Abaya said, therefore, so they're not going to roll. Rather, tunnels are prepared for them to in the ground through which they will pass to Eretz Israel. So we see here that resurrection of the dead can only happen in the land of Israel. Even the righteous who are going to be resurrected are going to have to somehow get to the land of Israel, and therefore they're going to have to pass through these underground tunnels. And this is one of the reasons why by our forefathers always wanted to be buried in the land of Israel specifically. For example, we have Jacob tells Joseph to bury him in the land of Israel specifically. Joseph tells his descendants to bury him in the land of Israel because they were concerned that they would not be merit to have tunnels, and therefore they would have to go through this painful thing of rolling through I don't know exactly how it works. So they felt that they would save themselves the trouble by having to be in the land of Israel. The Zohar, however, says that that Rabbi Yitzchak says the angel Gabriel brings them. So we see there's another opinion that it's actually going to be an angel that's going to bring the bodies to the land of Israel in order to be resurrected. So many people, including Maimonides himself, wanted to be buried in the land of Israel for this reason. And many righteous people, however, also wanted to be buried specifically in Chutz La'aretz, outside of Israel. For example, many Hasidic leaders, including the Chabad rabbis, always want to be buried with their community, so that way they would give hope, and that their community could pray at their graves, and have this connection even after their passing. As well, they felt that by being buried outside the land of Israel, since there are these tunnels that connect, like we mentioned, for the righteous to, in order they should go underground to the land of Israel, that actually a place where a tzaddik, where a righteous person is buried, has the status of the land of Israel, that spot. So there's a holiness there as well, that by this righteous person being specifically buried outside the land of Israel actually has this connection, brings this connection of the land of Israel to outside the land of Israel in the diaspora. Okay. Next, we're just going through some topics here, so bear with us. The next topic is reincarnation. Okay, so the Arizal discusses this idea. The Arizal was a Kabbalist who lived in the land of Israel many, many moons ago, and he discusses this idea that every soul has a job to do. If a soul doesn't finish its job, it's given a new job to do in a specific body, and then again and again and again. In truth, all souls are actually are really just parts of Adam, right? So, um, and we're all really just Adam was this general soul, and we are part of that general soul split throughout the generations. And within those souls that have been split up, every single soul has its mission and continues to come back. So, what's the obvious question? When does the reincarnation of the dead? Will there be multiple people who have the same soul? Will they come back? All come back, or only one will come back? But the truth is that a soul is like a fire. Just like when you light a fire, it doesn't diminish the original flame. That is kind of how it works with the soul. So every single soul has its part, and that means its mission is connected to this specific body. So therefore, this specific part of the soul, which encompasses at the same time the entire soul, again, kind of like the flame example, right? This part of the soul is not also, it's not just a part. It's really encompasses everything. It becomes its own identity. It's able, so it's not like the person who has the soul that has the specific mission is missing something, right? It's so every single soul has its mission and has its own identity as well. So therefore, every single person who passed away, there will be reincarnation. Okay, now what happens to the people who will be alive with the coming of Moshiach and the resurrection of the dead? So the Zohar says, it says in the verse, "Ani almis ve'achaya," I kill and I revive. So the Zohar says, until the coming of Mashiach, there was only death came from the bad, and life came from good, right? In other words, from God comes life. However, after the coming of Mashiach, I will be the one killing. Meaning, what does that mean? That God is going to have to remake everybody to be with purity. Therefore, everybody will have to pass away for a moment. The body will be remade, and they will and then they'll be revived. Now, this is based on the idea that after the sin of the eating of the tree of knowledge, right? There was this idea that now there is good and bad mixed in everything, right? So therefore, people had to pass away, right? As God says that if Adam and Eve would not pass away, then they would eat from the tree of life, and then the evil within them would live forever. So because there is that evil within them, we can't live forever. So therefore, everybody will have to kind of pass away in order to have this idea of remaking them in purity without any evil in them. Okay. The next thing is, how will the dead be resurrected? Will they be clothed? Will they be the way they were? How will they look? So it's brought in, it says in Bereshis Rabbah in the Medrash that the same way the person departed, that's how he will return. Okay, so for example, if someone departed blind, he will return blind. If he departed when he was deaf, he's going to return deaf, dumb, etc. So the question is, why would God not heal the person when they resurrected? They could come up as a healthy person, but God wants to show that these are not new people; these are the same people, right? This is a resurrection, not a birth of new people. So if all these people come and they say, "Hey, I'm so and so," yeah, you're not so and so; you're a new guy. You're all healthy. You passed away; you weren't healthy. So therefore, God will bring them back, and then He will. Then God will heal them, and this is brought also in the Zohar that that God will shine the sun on them, and they will be healed. And this again is brought also similarly in the Talmud. The Talmud says that God will remove the sun from its sheath, and that will heal everybody. Okay, and again in Bereshis Rabbah, it's also brought that also they will be clothed. They will return clothed in the same clothes that they wore in their lifetime. So this idea is brought down from a very famous story in Tanakh about Shmuel Hanavi and King Saul. Samuel the prophet and King Saul. That King Saul summoned the prophet Samuel after he passed away, and the way he was able to recognize him was he was wearing his cloak that he always wore. So we see this idea. There's a whole another story for another time, a whole long story about King Saul and his downfall. But he was able to recognize Samuel as he was, and it's also brought down in Ketubot, Gemara Ketubot, 111b, and it's brought in the Tosfos that Rebbe said to his sons, that was Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, the author of the Mishnah, he says, "Do not spend a lot of money on burial shrouds because the righteous will rise in their clothing." So therefore, so in other words, if you spent a lot of money on burial shrouds, it's not like when the resurrection happens, they're going to come up in shrouds. So that is why, till today, Jewish custom is not to spend, is to use simple shrouds for the dead, because they will be buried, they will come alive, I should say, in the clothing they wore in their lifetime. Okay, the next thing is the particulars involving the resurrection. How will the people be resurrected? So, the Zohar says there is one bone in the body that does never disintegrate. God will resurrect the person from that bone, and there's actually a debate where this bone is. Some say that it is at the nape of the neck, where the tefillin touch the back of the head, which would be like right where I'm pointing on the back of your head over here. Some say that it's the lowest vertebra of the spine. Either way, it says that this bone is where God rebuilds the body from, and never disintegrates totally. And this bone is sustained, it says, from the meal of Melava Malka, which is the meal that we eat at the conclusion of Shabbat. After Havdalah, there's a custom to wash and eat a meal, and many people are particular to eat Melava Malka because of this idea that it is the meal that sustains the bone that will be resurrected from. Okay. Now, what will life be like? This is in other words, what's the point of this whole thing, right? The resurrection and the coming Mashiach, what's the point? So the Rambam says, and this is brought from brought down from the Talmud as well, that the era of Olam Haba, after Techiyas HaMesim, after resurrection, it does not have any eating, drinking, procreation, commerce, jealousy, hatred, and competition. Rather, the righteous will sit with their crowns on their heads, basking in the glory of the divine light, and will never, and they will live forever. So what's the? So we see that there is really nothing physical about the. There's really nothing physical about it. Sounds like, right? It sounds like you're not eating, you're not drinking, procreation, nothing. So what is going on over here? And we know that when Mashiach comes, there's going to be a feast. It's going to be a special feast. It says in all the holy books, including the Talmud. You look in Pesachim 119b. It says in the future, God will prepare a feast for the righteous, and it goes on and on. That it'll say it goes through exactly the whole situation. That there's the forefathers are going to be there. The King Mashiach is going to be there. King David is going to be there, and they're going to go. Have this whole conversation that's recorded in the Talmud of who is going to make the benching and who's going to say what. So seemingly they're going to, and we know what's going to be served at the feast. Is going to be served. The wild ox is going to have a fight with the Leviathan, and they're gonna kill each other, and that's going to be the food for the feast, as well as it's going to be in a sukkah. It says, right, that the skin of the Leviathan is going to be made for it's going to be the walls of the sukkah, and all the Jewish people are going to be in one sukkah with this great feast. So, if there's not going to be, who said there's not going to be eating and drinking, right? If he said there's not going to be one place, we said there's not going to be eating and drinking and nothing. And at the same time, we're saying that there's going to be this great physical feast in a physical place, doing physical things. But rather, in the era of Mashiach, we will not need to eat. That's the difference. We're not going to need to eat to nurture our bodies. Eating and drinking will serve a whole different purpose. So really, the whole idea of a messianic era and the coming of Mashiach, which we discussed at the end of the study of Rambam that we just concluded last Shabbat, this is something, it's a totally new way of the world. We're not just in a rat race to try to keep living, right? That's kind of how we are now. We eat, we drink, we sleep, we do all these things just to keep on going. But when Mashiach comes, we'll be sustained in and of itself, and our only pursuit will be to know God and to understand the God and understand His Torah. So with that, we'll conclude, and want to encourage everybody we're starting actually, I believe it is today, that we start the actual study of the laws. The beginning of the cycle of Rambam, we go through the principles of the laws and the counting of the mitzvahs. So today, in the cycle of 3 chapters, or if you keep the cycle of the Sefer Mitzvahs, of the counting of the mitzvahs, count the Sefer Mitzvahs only takes 1 or 2 minutes a day. All you do is you count the mitzvahs that are relevant, and this way you're united with all the Jewish people who are studying Rambam. It's a great cycle to do. You could check it out on Chabad.org. You could see the daily cycle for kids. My kids even do it now. It's called chitasforkids.org, something like that. And they have little audio recordings. There's chayenu.org and all kinds of different types of apps and technology. Or you get a good book. It's not so terrible. You get a book of Rambam. It's also good. So I want to wish everybody a good Shabbos, and we'll see you next week. And hopefully you'll be with us 1 week into the cycle of Rambam.